Greetings everyone, I'm Jeff and welcome to But Words Remain. Seeing how popular our Bloodlines videos have become, Cindy and I have decided to dedicate our very first lore series to Vampire the Masquerade. So consider this video an introduction to the franchise for those of you who have only played the video games and would like to know more about their story. I have personally met this franchise after watching a review of Bloodlines right here on YouTube. I then proceeded to buy the game and immediately fell in love with its dark and mysterious atmosphere. Seriously, not just Vampire the Masquerade, but the World of Darkness itself is one of the most interesting and detailed fictional settings I have ever had a pleasure of reading about. And to be honest, I'm quite excited to talk about it. But let's start with the basics. What exactly is Vampire the Masquerade? Well, for those of you who have only played Bloodlines and are, like me, anxiously waiting for Bloodlines 2, Vampire the Masquerade started as a TTRPG, which, for the uninitiated, stands for Tabletop Role-Playing Game. Vampire the Masquerade was created by Mark Rein-Hagen and released to the public in 1991 by White Wolf Publishing. And in fact, Vampire the Masquerade is only one of several RPG settings, also published by White Wolf, which all take place within the same fictional universe called the World of Darkness. Other games which also take place in the World of Darkness are Hunter the Reckoning, Mage the Ascension, and Werewolf the Apocalypse. And what is the World of Darkness, you ask? It is this grand fictional setting that is, in many ways, similar to our own reality. Here, history progressed as expected, with all key historical events happening in their respective dates. Humanity here also went through a Stone Age, the Bronze Age, the Middle Ages, all the way through the current days, which in this universe are referred to as the Modern Nights. The key difference, however, is that within the World of Darkness, the supernatural is very much real. So we have things like magic, which is practiced and has been practiced in secret for millennia. And obviously we also have supernatural creatures, such as werewolves, ghosts, fairies, demons, and of course, vampires. There have been periods in history in which some of these creatures lived openly, more or less coexisting peacefully with humanity. In the Modern Nights, however, they exist in secret, pulling the strings of human society and manipulating our very lives and our very history, right under humanity's nose. Chief among them in that regard are the vampires. Think for a moment of the most powerful people in human society. You are most likely thinking of politicians or successful businessmen. In Vampire the Masquerade, many of these people are controlled or manipulated by the vampires, who use fake identities as shareholders, investors and the like, to further their real, dark objectives. As you can probably tell by now, the World of Darkness is, as the very name suggests, a bleak setting. Not only for humans, but for the supernaturals too. Vampires constantly fight against each other, damned to forever mistrust and steal the blood of their own kind in an endless war of politics and deception which they call the Jihad. To quote directly from the games, the World of Darkness is a place where immortal beasts pull the strings of humanity. Violence and despair are common here. The world is bleak, but escape is an ever-present commodity. Perhaps too present. But let's talk about the vampires themselves. First, they don't actually like the word vampire, and prefer to call themselves kindred or Cainites, depending on belief or political allegiance. We'll talk more about that later. Second, it is important to mention that vampires within this setting are in many ways different from their typical representation in pop culture. And in Vampire the Masquerade, many of the most common vampire tropes are nothing but myth. For example, vampires are unaffected by silver or garlic, they can cross running water without problem, holy symbols such as crucifixes have no power against them. Except, of course, for the rare occasion in which they are used by someone who has true faith. And finally, they do not require permission to enter someone else's home. Seriously, if you have ever played Vampire the Masquerade before, then you know that breaking into private property is just part of a common night for most vampires. However, some kindred myths are, to a certain degree, true. A wooden stake through the heart will not kill a vampire, but it will paralyze them until the stake is removed. Fire is not only deadly to vampires, but actually causes most kindred to flee in panic at the mere sight of it. And finally, in this universe, sunlight is just as lethal to vampires as it is in most other vampire stories. Complete exposure to sunlight will bring most, if not all kindred, to their immediate final death. Final death being the term used to refer to a kindred's second and last death, since in order to become a vampire, one must actually die. And since we touched on the subject, how does one become a vampire? Here too, Vampire the Masquerade differs from most other vampire stories. Simply biting someone is not enough to transform them into a vampire. Otherwise, the world would certainly be taken by a vampire epidemic. And considering how the main theme of Vampire the Masquerade is hiding in plain sight, that would simply not be ideal. No, the process of transforming a human into a vampire is a bit more complex, and commonly known in kindred society as the embrace. In order to embrace a human, the kindred must first drain the chosen human of all of their blood, which will inevitably kill them. But as I said before, dying is actually part of the process, so don't worry. After this, the kindred must make the now dead human drink some of their vampire blood, essentially replacing their mortal human blood with that of a vampire. A few days later, after a series of bodily transformations, the individual will reawaken as a fledgling vampire. The embrace is seen as a deep and personal process in kindred society, and it often creates a strong bond between the two individuals, similar to that of father and son. The vampire who initiates the embrace is known as the sire, while the human who undergoes the embrace is known as the child. Kindred tradition holds that it is the sire's responsibility to instruct their child or children in how to adapt to their new existence and how to uphold kindred laws and customs. Also, when a child first awakens from their embrace, they are very, very hungry, and it falls on their sire to provide them with sustenance through whatever means they can find. As to what vampires can do, again, some of the most common tropes are false, while others are true to some extent. First, all kindred are incredibly resilient, being able to sustain levels of physical damage that would be more than enough to kill the average human. On top of their natural resilience, they can restore their bodies, mending whatever wounds they suffered and, in extreme cases, even regrowing lost limbs. Note that this process isn't exactly healing, but actually a strange phenomenon that forces a kindred's body to return to the state it was at the night of their embrace. For this reason, any scars or other debilitations present before the embrace will remain even after the individual becomes a vampire. It should be noted, however, that in order to mend more serious injuries, a kindred will require lots of rest and feeding. The more serious the injury, the more rest they will need. Second, while young vampires are not inherently stronger or more agile than humans, as they grow older they can become far more powerful than humans can ever hope to be. Additionally, all kindred have the ability to use their blood to temporarily enhance their physical capabilities to potentially superhuman levels. This is probably where the usual vampire myths of superhuman strength or speed come from. And finally, no vampire story is complete without mention of their supernatural powers, such as being able to turn into mist or control animals. In Vampire the Masquerade, such abilities are possible through the use of disciplines. Disciplines are, to put it simply, magic-like abilities that most kindred can use. There is a large number of different disciplines, and I will talk more about each individual one in future videos. For the moment, let's just say that through disciplines, a kindred can perform any number of supernatural feats, such as mentioned before, turning into mist, controlling the minds of mortals and other kindred, using animals as familiars, moving faster than the eye can see, or even turning completely invisible. While it is technically possible for kindred to learn any discipline, provided they find someone who is willing to teach them, most kindred prefer to stick to the 3 disciplines favored by their clan. Clans are vampire bloodlines which, presumably, link all the way back to the third generation of vampires, also known as the Antediluvians. They are called this way because they were supposedly embraced before the biblical Great Flood, as described in the Book of Genesis. This would make them some of the oldest and most powerful creatures on the planet, but kindred history is surrounding a mystery, and as a matter of fact, most vampires today don't even believe the Antediluvians existed. Regardless, there are a total of 13 major vampire clans, each one descending from a particular antediluvian. Each clan has their own strengths and weaknesses, and is specialized in 3 particular disciplines. But more importantly, they each possess their own style or quirks, ranging from social behavior to even the way they dress. For example, members of the Brujah clan are known to be rebellious and susceptible to anger, often coming into conflict with other kindred. The more stereotypical Brujah kindred often wear biker-style clothing such as leather jackets or ripped jeans. On the other hand, the vampire of the Ventrue clan are usually calm, calculative, and manipulative, and frequently occupy positions of power within kindred society. Due to their more aristocratic nature, Ventrue vampire often wear formal clothing, such as suits or long coats. Also, each clan possesses their own curse, a form of compulsive behavior that afflicts all members of that particular bloodline, and often results in even more conflict, both in and outside their clan. We'll talk more about each individual clan in future videos. But perhaps more important than the clans are the different political factions within kindred society. Politics are, after all, a big part of any story set within the world of darkness, with lies, betrayal, and manipulation being common elements. The most well-known and impactful of these factions are the 3 sects, the Camarilla, the Sabbat, and the Anarch Revolt. Amongst players, the most popular of all 3 sects is likely the Camarilla. They are the ones who created and who uphold the Masquerade, a code which dictates kindred must hide their existence from humanity, assimilating into human society and essentially hidden in plain sight. Vampires who break the Masquerade by revealing the supernatural to humans are hunted down by agents of the Camarilla and given final death. The Camarilla also claims that all vampires are part of it, whether they recognize it or not, which often results in them being seen as authoritarian and corrupt by vampires who do not accept their authority. The Sabbat stands in direct opposition to the Camarilla. They believe that vampires should rule the planet and see humans as little more than cattle. Their members are often monstrous vampires who have embraced their inner beast. They are also ardent believers of some of the most obscure parts of vampire history. For example, the Sabbat claims the Camarilla is in fact trying to bring about the apocalypse by reawakening the Antediluvians. Thus, the Sabbat's main objectives are to fight the Camarilla, to establish vampires as the dominant species on the planet, and also to locate and destroy these sleeping ancients. As for the Anarchs, they are not exactly a sect per se, but more a term used to refer to vampires who do not fall into any of the other 2 sects. Any kindred who doesn't recognize the authority of the Camarilla may be called an Anarch, though whether they see themselves as an Anarch or not is up to them. The more serious Anarchs, however, are openly aggressive to anyone who tries to claim rule over their territory, Camarilla or otherwise, and strongly defend the idea that vampires should govern themselves. But make no mistake, in Vampire the Masquerade there are no good guys, and members of any group can be and often are terrible monsters. And finally, I'd like to briefly talk about the origin of vampires. After all, after hearing all of this, you might be asking yourself, where did vampires even come from? Again, kindred history is quite confusing and most vampires don't even believe most of these ancient stories. But the most accepted, or perhaps the most popular explanation, is that the original vampire was none other than Cain, the oldest son of Adam and Eve, the brother of Abel, and the first murderer. According to legend, Cain was cursed by God to forever walk the earth, forever banished from the realm of the sun, forced to feed on his fellow man to sustain his dark existence. His children too would be cursed to forever mistrust and forever envy their own kind, much like Cain envied and mistrusted his own brother. Following in the steps of their dark father, kindred are damned to lie, deceive, and kill their own kind until the final night comes, in what they call Gehenna, the end times. I personally really like the story surrounding Cain, and it is, in my opinion, one of the best parts of all the lore surrounding this franchise. But it is also a long and detailed story, and I can't really fit it into this video, which is already quite lengthy as it is. So we'll talk more about this in our next video. Until then, I hope you have enjoyed this not so short introduction to Vampire the Masquerade. If you did, be sure to show us your support by liking the video and subscribing to our channel. This is our channel's first big project, but also our very first voiced video. So if you have any feedback, please feel free to share it in the comment section down below. But until then, I have been Jeff from But Words Remain. Thank you for watching until the end, and I'll see you in our next video. See ya!